Good evening. Welcome to the Woodchuck Report. Today, Friday, April 13th. Wow, almost forgot times to be. Today on Friday, April 13th. I hope you all are enjoying that wonderful weather. I know I am. I walked out today in sweatshirt and sweatpants. And flip-flops. So today's a big day. I got many things to cover that have been interesting over the last, actually mostly covers the last 2 or so weeks, 3 weeks. Things like the new gun control that was signed on Wednesday, the trade wars that will continue to go in. I also have a little thing on the troops to the border in case you didn't pay attention, and possible Syrian attack on our part, and of course, everyone's favorite, the Facebook data breach, which happened a little while back, which is only catching our attention now. So I'll start off with the gun control, S.55. Now that happened on Wednesday. Governor Phil Scott, he signed the gun control bill, which, if you still weren't paying attention, it was a legislature that was put in both through the House and the Senate, and just want to make sure I get all the bullet points here. What the bill will now do is it's going to raise the age from buying a gun from 18 to 21. It's going to ban magazines over 10 rounds, and it's going to make all Vermont transactions between non-family members will be required to pass through a background control. And there's new measures that will make it so that guns can be taken from those who it makes it easier for guns to be taken away from people who are deemed dangerous or who have been known or are prone to domestic violence. So those are the big things that it's going to happen. It's taking effect now, actually, since it will start. Some of the things that we can watch out that will be exempted for example, the ban on magazines. It's going to take effect immediately, and we are going to have the ability to purchase those magazines till October 1st. They are allowing all gun manufacturers, the shop owners, to sell their existing stocks of any high-capacity magazines until they run out, and we're allowed to purchase till October 1st. Also including the whole bomb stock thing that kicked in, which is of negligible matter. So one of the many reasons why it came about is, as Governor Phil Scott has said, was as he said in his campaign promises, that he was against any and all gun control measures, but he seemed to have changed his mind. And one of the things he was quoted as saying that the results from the Parkland, Florida shooting, and also the attempted shooting in Fairhaven, Vermont, were the 2 reasons he cited that caused him to change and accept and vow to sign the gun control, which kicked in, and it's now a thing. So it passed the Senate last week by a vote of 17 to 13. And, well, not much else to talk about on that since it's now a law. So I guess the only thing we can hope for is whoever the next governor is to repeal it, or, well, pretty much a repealing is the next thing we can hope for. To be moving on, I'm actually going to skip the tariffs thing, and I'm going to skip to the troops to the border. So I believe it was several weeks ago, President Trump, he through an executive order, sent a bunch of National Guard troops down to secure the border or to assist in the border. And they were all National Guards which were deployed to the border. And one of the many things, I wrote a lot of the things they were talking about, is these National Guard troops, they'll be there to provide air support through drones, light, medium, heavy lift helicopters. They're there to maintain roads, infrastructure, clean vegetation, assist with facility maintenance, operate surveillance systems. They will be there to support Homeland Security, but one of the things they were mentioned is they would not be arresting migrants or carrying out any armed patrols. They will only be armed for their own self-protection and not for actual migrant patrol, as I said earlier. Many of the things that's going to happen with the troops is that right now Trump would like about 2,000 to 4,000 troops to be sent over. There are currently only a little under 1,000, about 1,000 right now, but he would like to send 2,000 to 4,000. And one of the things is the money coming from this or being used is coming from the Pentagon's $700 billion budget. In case you're all wondering, it's coming straight from their $700 billion budget. So one of the many things the critics are citing against this idea is that the Border Patrol, which he's sending National Guards to assist Border Patrol because he was saying they weren't doing enough. But as has been noted, is that there are way more Border Patrol agents now, and the last time the National Guards were sent to the border to do the same exact thing was under former President Bush's tenure, and during this, which was back in 2006. So at that time, there were approximately, make sure I actually get this number right, so I don't try to mislead you. There were approximately 11,000 agents which were deployed back then during 2006. There are currently about 16,600 agents now. Back then in 2006, they made a little over 1 million arrests, which averaged out to about 90 arrests per agent. So 90 arrests per agent for 11,000 agents. It's a little under 1 million. And currently there are 16,600 agents, and as of last year, they made about 310,000 arrests, which is only averaging 19 per agent. So there's been a memo that's been sent through the Department of Defense and Homeland Security that they're trying to authorize a total of 4,000 personnel, which will be through September 30th. So there's a payment plan for that many, 4,000 personnel through September, but it is currently unknown how long this whole deployment status will be. So that's one thing for the border. I will get into the meat of the thing, that which irks me the most. Tariffs and trade wars. That is the biggest thing to me currently that we're having. Well, it's not the biggest thing. It's one of the things that's going to affect us the most currently. Now, if you don't remember, I'll do a little recap. President Trump, through executive orders, put a bunch of tariffs on both steel and aluminum that were being imported to America. Arguments, he was saying that our industry has been suffering under the hands of imports, and so he's trying to level the playing field. So that was actually the second round of tariffs he had. He had a bunch of tariffs earlier, which I'll get into how they all were structured. So for the trade war that's going on that we're having with China, is that if you remember, Trump during his campaign promises, he was threatening to pull out of the TPP, which was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and he was threatening to pull us out of NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was made back in '95. I believe it's '95. I'll have to double check on that one because I forget exactly. So one of the things about the TPP was it was a 12-nation trade agreement in which he as I said, he backed out on his fourth day in office, and the 12 nations that were in it were China, Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. Obviously, we would have been the 13th one, but he pulled out. And so he was against TPP because his then running opponent, Hillary Clinton, was a supporter of it. Now, in recent news, that he's planning on re-entering the TPP. And one of the reasons for this was because we had the tariffs he enacted on both, let me make sure I get all this correctly. He put tariffs on solar panels originally and washing machines. That was back in January. And then here come this past March, he put tariffs on both steel and aluminum. Now, those steel and aluminum were just any and all imports, but then he specifically made some suspensions on those tariffs from any country, from say Canada, Mexico, the EU, Australia, South Korea, Brazil, and Argentina. So all those guys importing their steel and aluminums were exempt from the tariffs. So who did that left out? Essentially China. So the tariffs were worth about $55 billion worth of high-tech Chinese imports, which now face a 25% import duty, as well as the 25% on the steel and aluminum. China, in retaliation, put tariffs on our exports to them, which hit soybeans. Now, following the tit for tat, those who were hit most against China's tariffs against us was the farming belt. So their senators started voicing their complaints to Trump, who finally realized the tariffs were hurting us more than they were hurting them. So now he's deciding to go back and enter the TPP. Now, why would this be a big thing? Well, it's a trade agreement. Everyone benefits to an extent. There are always losers, but more people benefit than don't. But one of the things about the TPP that they're now thinking about going back into was to counter China's influence. Because the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, puts out a set guidelines for everybody. And so violating it, there are rules for violations too, which is easily curbed and can be brought upon. There's arbitration, mediation, and a whole bunch of other things. Without it, a country can pretty much do dumping practices as what China was being accused of, which was one of the reasons why he came about with the tariffs. So now, the thing is, we are part of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which sets certain guidelines and rules of behavior for any country that's signatory. And so the workaround for Trump's tariff, why they were illegal, was because the legal basis was in, this is some dry stuff right here, Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Now, this allows a president to impose tariffs based on recommendations from the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, and I quote, "If an article is being imported into the United States in such quantities or under such circumstances as to threaten or impair the national security," end quote. Now, the reason why this was such a big precedent was because it has never been used before. Since it came out, remember, it was back in 1962. No president has ever used that to instill tariffs. And obviously Trump first. So now those tariffs have been found to lead to more U.S. economic harm, which is why those senators in the farming areas started complaining to him, and which is why he's now backstepping and going to renegotiate and enter the TPP. Now, former President Bush, did enact steel tariffs back in his tenure, back in 2006, I believe. I don't actually have those exact dates. And so, having hindsight being 2020, we have time to study and look at what the effects of those tariffs were, and it's nothing good. So, one of the things that they found out during Bush's steel tariffs showed that there was more job loss. There were all job losses. There were no job gains because of the tariffs. And in fact, the job losses got larger when the country the tariffs are against starts retaliating, which China is starting to do. Now, those tariffs have been shown to harm the U.S. allies more so than China because most of our steel imports come from our allies, Mexico, Canada, and a bunch of all those other countries I just listed. Now, if you were following along, since they hurt our allies more, there's a reason why they got exempted. And those countries being the Canada, Mexico, the EU, Australia, South Korea, Brazil, and Argentina, who are all allies of ours and our largest metal commodities importers. So they got exempted and China got hit. China then retaliated with soybeans, which hit the farmers the most since most of their production goes to China. Most of their exports goes to China. So now, hence, we're having this tit for tat. Now, one of the things he was planning on doing was looking into ethanol and to try to offset the negatives that they were being hit with, until it was pointed out that also is another bad idea, especially if you're like me, who's against having ethanol in their gasoline because it's of no purpose and no use, and it just harms your car way more than, well, it harms your car. That's a completely another conversation to have. So more about these tariffs. One of the things that is found in our economics is that the U.S., we produce about 2/3 of our own steel, and so the rest comes from our allies, Canada, Mexico, as I just have said now twice, so that the whole tariff aim at China becomes a very, what's the analogy I want to use? Pretty much cutting off our own nose to spite our own face, because it's being shown to have little to no effect. So, back to the TPP he's planning on trading. Reason why he was not going back to is try to get an even playing field. And one of the reasons that Trump himself has stated was that he would like to renegotiate for better deals for us being American workers, American consumers, and so on. Now, he did say the same thing for NAFTA. He was going to renegotiate NAFTA because his main beef with NAFTA was that it harmed the farmers, which, ironically, his tariffs are now harming the farmers. So he did, when he was running and early in his presidency, he did threaten to pull out of NAFTA if he could not negotiate better deals, and, well, NAFTA trade agreements are not going very well for him. So we might be pulling out the NAFTA sooner rather than later. And make sure I covered it. That's about it in terms of coverage. I'm just double checking on my time here. So next big thing, next topic of issue I'm going to talk about, and we're hitting foreign policy, is the Syrian attacks. Now, earlier this week, I believe, it was alleged about 400 people may or may not have been suspected may have been attacked in a suspected chemical attacks in the town of Doma, Syria. Doma is in the outskirts of Damascus, Damascus being the capital city of Syria. Now, some of these symptoms, and this is so far only videos that have been shown, but the symptoms have included respiratory failure, acute irritation of the mucous membranes, essentially the inner linings of your nose, and disruption to the central nervous system. So those were the symptoms that were seen. Now, the reason why none of this has been confirmed is because currently no one's being allowed to look at the bodies. So the U.S. wanted to send an investigation team. Russia denied it. Russia wanted to send an investigation team, and we denied it. So right now, everyone's butting heads. Everyone wants to send someone, but no one wants to say yes, which is a very precarious position to be in. Now, the WHO, the World Health Organization, says that about 70 people who were taking shelter during the attacks died in the actual attack, and about 43 deaths may have been related to the exposure. Now, the Russia and Syria are denying any involvement in it. Russia is blaming the UK for orchestrating the whole attack, saying we didn't have anything to do with it. It's not an actual chemical attack. You're bluffing. This is all propaganda. Of course, the UK saying Russia and Syria through Syria had many things to do with it. So the UK is responding. They sent submarines to the coast of Syria for any retaliation that might happen once all the investigation kicks in, and it's actually determined whether it was or it was not an actual Syrian attack. And so, of course, we ourselves are sending destroyers in with, obviously, Tomahawk missiles and any surface-to-surface missiles to respond, and also to attack military installations if it's so deemed necessary. Now, I find this all very bewildering, since here we are getting ready to we're essentially getting ready to bomb Syria because Syria bombed Syria, so that we can show Syria that they should not bomb Syria. yet somehow we are not allowing Syrian refugees because we just bombed Syria for Syria bombing Syria. So it's a very convoluted program of why are we still here? Why are we still there? It's a civil war. Let that one play out. Now, the last topic, just want to make sure that's the last topic I would like to talk about, because I too am part of this, is the Facebook breach. If you're not a Facebook person and you don't do social media, you don't care, so good on you. But it was found in 2015 that a institution, the Cambridge Analytica, back in 2015, went in and was able to steal a bunch of Facebook user profile data. Now, it was alleged about 87 million users, but Facebook says it's a lot less than that. Regardless, it still happened. Now, as I said, it was back in 2015. Here, in 2018, 3 years later, we are finding out about it. And the reason why we're finding out about it is because there were reports that reporters obtained that got leaked out. And as such, Facebook had to come clean about it. Now, if you were hearing on the news a couple of days ago, Zuckerberg was summoned to the Senate to have a hearing to talk about the Facebook data breach. And 44 senators showed up to essentially, I apologize for laughing, but I did watch the highlights, and it was essentially the senators asking questions of how Facebook works. That's really what it was. Was there anything meaningful coming out of it? No. Should there have been? Yes. I mean, when you waste a bunch of taxpayer money to get 44 senators to grill the CEO of a company, you would think, those senators would know what they're talking about, the platform they're talking about, and would have actual serious questions. So some of the questions that should have been answered, for example, why hasn't Facebook been more transparent with the use of data, how it gets used or how it gets abused, or what is the extent of Facebook data monitoring? Because as soon as you make a profile, everyone knows you put anything on the internet, including this very broadcast, it's going to be on the internet. So Facebook itself keeps and stores user data profiles. And of course, one of the big things is, as the saying goes, little bits of information is useless, but a lot of information is very useful. So from a single data page of, say, I'll use myself for an example, it doesn't take a whole lot for Facebook to start figuring out, all right, what are my likes, what are my dislikes? If they know enough of that, they can start tailoring certain ads to me, for me. One of the things that kicked in was when you're reading your news sites, how the news on your Facebook feeds tends to be more in line to what you already agree with. And it's because Facebook has already analyzed you and know whether you're conservative over here or you're liberal over here or you're anywhere in between, you're whatnot. They've already figured out what your key points, what your likes, dislikes, what you're more likely to watch, read, or like, dislike, laugh at, and so on, Facebook emojis. So all that data gets compiled and stored. Now, Facebook doesn't sell the data, but what they do, they trade the data with advertisement companies, because advertisement companies would love to know love to have a target demographic. The target demographic, for example, a Stella Artois drink may not be the same for the target demographic of, say, a Rolex watch. Very well could be. They would love to know that because it can save them a lot of advertising dollars, and they can tailor-make commercials specifically to that. One of those things that helps make your marketing way more focused, way more efficient. Now, this all got breached, and a bunch of the data users were picked out, and what Cambridge Analytica did was they essentially made fake profiles of people. So it was a test. It was more or less a test, but these profiles are now out there, And if you remember, this is the same type of thing that happened back in 2016 with Equifax. And if those of you who don't remember, Equifax had a bunch of data breaches. In fact, actually, it happened prior to that, is we only found about it later again. So Equifax had a bunch of data breaches in which millions of users' financial information got stolen. And so, of course, then there was no hearing and nothing came of it. Equifax pretty much got fined, they apologized, but that was about it. So for me, someone like me looking at this response to Facebook user data having a bigger deal than, say, people's financial security, seeing that identity fraud is a really big problem, and anyone who's watching this who's gone through identity fraud knows very well that it can be very hard to recover from it, especially depending on how much or what type of damage they did. If they took you for the cleaners, it could be years before you recover from identity fraud. But then it's been brushed under the rug. I'm pretty sure some of you forgot about it until I just mentioned it. But here we go. Here we are having a Senate hearing about Facebook user data. So I guess the Senate really wants to know that I really like Orange Sunkist. So that's one of the many things. And also one of the other breaches that did happen, back relating all this together, was I can't even read my own handwriting here. Nope, can't even read my own handwriting. So we're gonna ignore that. But, so, I guess oh look, I'm getting the timer. So, in closing, let me close before I get the lights get turned off on me. So, for Facebook data usage, be careful what you post online. Obviously, if you don't already know that, I don't know where you've been. If it goes on the internet, it's always on the internet. And what the government sees, everybody sees. That Fourth Amendment thing has definitely gone away. TPP, we're going back to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So, yay, thank you. I can't believe I'm saying this. Thank you, senators of the farmland. NAFTA is not going too well for Trump, so we might be pulling out of that. And we're sending troops to the border, approximately 2,000 troops to help essentially assist Border Patrol agents, which there's approximately 17,000, and to assist the Department of Homeland Security. They're not actually being used for patrol, but just more of essentially maintenance custodians. And last but not least, we have the gun control that's been signed. So if you're under the age of 21, you have to be 21 to buy a gun. Large capacity magazines, anything over 10 rounds, going away. So run to your nearest gun store and buy them up now, because there will be a black market for those. No more bump stocks. If you don't know what a bump stock is, then it doesn't apply to you because they were dumb anyways, and they really affect a very little amount of people. Any Vermont transactions between non-family members are now going to be have to go through a background check. And so with that, I tell you, have a good day, everyone, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Enjoy the weather, because I know I will. And I'll have some catchy saying, but I don't currently. But you stay classy, San Diego. Keep it up, Vermont. Keep it up.